Hi, this is Gabe from FluentForever.com. At this point, you've seen and heard all of the vowels and consonants of Japanese. If you're using one of my trainers, it will take you through each of these sounds that you've encountered here, teach you the spellings that produce those sounds, and push them into your long-term memory. And if you're not, that's okay too. The goal of these videos was to give you a passing familiarity with all of the available sounds, so that when you study them in detail, they're not going to be totally new to you. That'll make them easier to learn. In either case, since you're now familiar with the available sounds in IPA, I want to show you how Japanese makes those sounds with the kana syllabaries. And again, we'll mostly focus on katakana, since that's what we've been using throughout these videos, though there are a couple of differences between how the katakana and hiragana systems work, and we'll talk about those too. Back in video 1, we talked about how nearly every character in hiragana and katakana was either a single vowel, like a, or a consonant and vowel combination, like ka. All in all, each syllabary has 46 characters, which is not that many, given that there are way more than 46 possible syllables in the Japanese language. Much of this video is dedicated to showing you how to play around with the kana characters to produce a greater variety of sounds. We'll start by discussing voiced consonants.
Say you know that ka character, but you want to say ga, as in gaun.
Rather than needing to memorize an entirely new character, all you have to do is stick 2 lines, known as dakuten, on the top right of ka. This turns that voiceless K sound into a voiced G sound. And this can be done with every voiceless consonant in Japanese.
So here's kakikugeko and gagigugeko, sasuseso, zazuzezo, tateto, and dadedo.
It also works with the palatalized consonants.
So chi turns into G, and oddly enough, shi also turns into G.
That latter spelling of G is actually much more common than the former. You can stick those dakuten into characters starting with H,
like haheho, which turns them into a B sound, babebo.
This isn't really logical. B is a voiced version of P, after all, not H, but it does mean you don't have to memorize as many characters.
That also applies to hi and hu. When you add dakuten, they turn into B and bu.
There is one sound that's missing, which is P. Since we took a kind of weird route to the B consonant by adding dakuten to the H-based characters in the kana, we'll take a similarly weird route to P by adding a little circle thing to those same characters.
Here's papipupepo, based off of hahihuheho.
Again, not entirely logical, but it means less memorization, so consider it a gift. Our next topic. Let's talk about the palatalized consonants.
Like as in kiku and as in hita.
The characters for these consonants are always connected to the E vowel in the kana. For these examples, ki and hi, there is no single character that connects these consonants to other vowels. Sounds like kya or hyu. But Japanese does have words that use these sounds.
Words like kabetsu and hyus.
And they spell those sounds in a clever, slightly complex manner. To get started, in addition to the ki and hi symbols, let me introduce you to 2 new kana.
Ya and yu as in yado and yukari.
We'll keep all 4 characters on the left side of the screen so you can refer to that if you need. So, if you want that ki consonant connected to an a vowel, as in kyabetsu, then you will combine ki and ya, like this, kya. If you want to combine that consonant with u, then you'll combine ki and yu, like this, kyu.
This shows up in words like kyuba. Here's how you spell hyu as in hyuzu, and here's how you spell hya.
Notice that the ya and yu characters, when they're used in these sorts of combinations, are extra small. As a rule of thumb, if you see a big character and a small character afterwards, you take the consonant of the first character and the vowel of the second. You stick them together into a single syllable. Japanese actually uses this trick fairly often for foreign sounds. For instance, party is a recent addition to Japanese, but T isn't a legal Japanese character. Generally, when you combine T and E, you get chi, not T. So to get that T syllable, the Japanese took their te symbol, sort of the closest thing, and combined it with a small version of their E vowel. For any of these sorts of situations, you follow that exact same rule of thumb. You take the first consonant of the first character and the vowel of the second character. Te and small e turn into T, as in party, and fu and e turn into fe, feri. So, next topic. Double consonants and double vowels. We'll start with the consonants. Double consonants are pretty simple in Japanese. There is a character
called the chisai tsu,
or little tsu which doubles whatever consonant comes next. It looks like this in katakana and like this in hiragana.
If you want to spell a word like petto with a double T, then you stick that character before the to, turning petto into petto.
The character is called chisai tsu, little tsu, because it's just reusing that tsu character in both katakana and hiragana and making it smaller, like we saw with those palatalized consonant combinations we talked about earlier.
So here's saka, and here's sakka in hiragana, and here's roji, and here's roji in katakana.
As a quick aside, you'll occasionally see the little tsu used at the end of words. This happens for emphasis, and it tells you to make a glottal stop at the end of that word.
As in atsu and mate.
For double vowels, you'll do different things depending upon which syllabary you're using, which is one of the only times the two syllabaries behave differently. Making double vowels in katakana is really, really easy. All you need to do is stick a dash after the vowel you want to lengthen.
As in biba.
For hiragana, it's a little more complex. Let's look at tori and tori from the last video.
Tori is made up of two characters, to and ri. Tori is made of three, to, o, and ri.
Basically, you're using the matching single vowel character, a, I, U, E, or o, to lengthen any character that ends in that same vowel.
So if you take obasan, aunt, and you want to turn that into oba-san, grandmother, you'll add an a character right after the ba. Obasan, oba-san.
One last weirdness with the hiragana double vowels. There are two combinations that are a bit irregular. The first is what happens when you combine o and u. That combination turns into a long o sound.
So if you take ko and u and stick them together, you'll get ko, as in kinko.
Similarly, if you try to combine e and i together, that generally gives you a long e sound.
So if you take se and i and stick them together, you can get se, as in wakse.
Two topics left. We're going to talk about a few tricky characters and then how to make devoiced vowels. First, the tricky characters. We'll talk about ha and he first. You know how most languages have spelling rules and then a giant list of really common words that are exceptions to those spelling rules? Words you just need to memorize? Well, these two characters are some of the only exceptions in the Japanese language. They're extremely common grammatical function words. One is the topic marker, wa, which tells you what information is most important in the sentence, and the other is the direction marker, e, which is a lot like the preposition to in English in a sentence like I go to school. So you're going to encounter them all the time. They're spelled ha and he, but they're pronounced wa and e. The last tricky character is the Japanese n character, n. This is the only character in the kana that doesn't have a vowel connected to it, and as such, you'll never find it at the beginning of a word. It's an interesting character, because the sound it makes depends upon the character that comes next. Basically, Japanese is a lazy language. They are really efficient about making their mouths and tongues do as little work as possible.
So if you stick an N before a character that uses your lip, like B or P or M, as in rampu,
then instead of taking the effort to make an N sound with some part of your tongue, you'll just replace it with an M sound.
you say rampu.
And not ranpu with an N. Similarly, if the next character starts with a consonant that uses your tongue in the front of your mouth, like T, D, or N, then you'll make that N with the front of your tongue. So it moves as little as possible.
That gives you words like manto.
If the next character uses the back of your tongue, like a K or a G, then you'll use the back of your tongue.
Ring.
And if the N is at the end of a word or before S, Z, H, W, or R, or the G sound or a vowel, then you're going to do what we talked about in that second video when we discussed the uvular N. Your tongue is going to relax, your soft palate's going to come down towards it, the vowel is going to turn nasal for a moment.
In, an, on. And you'll get words like rinsu and cleansing, nihon.
And with that, we're on to our very last topic in Japanese, devoiced vowels. We already talked about what they sound like in the last video, basically whispered versions of normal I and U. In this video, I want to give you a few rules of thumb to figure out when they can show up. And so the rules are, when an I or U vowel shows up at the end of a word after a voiceless consonant, like sk, t, or p, then it can be devoiced.
So anytime you see tsu, su, ku, or pu, or chi, shi, ki, or pi at the end of a word, it can get devoiced. That gives you words like nasu, eggplant, and ich, one.
When one of those two vowels shows up in the middle of a word between two voiceless consonants, it can also be devoiced.
That gives you words like chi and kushi.
These two example words lead us to our last rule. Generally, if there are two vowels that fit the bill for devoicing,
In kshi, for instance, we have a u between two voiceless consonants and a e at the end of the word after a voiceless consonant.
but in cases like these, only the first one gets devoiced and the second one doesn't. Basically, in Japanese, you can't have giant strings of devoiced vowels, because then the word wouldn't have any audible vowels, and you just get some giant string of consonants, like ksh. So, for all of these rules, I've been talking about where you can devoice vowels, but not necessarily about where you should. That's because voicing and devoicing vowels ends up being influenced a lot by taste, or region, or the gender of the speaker. It's actually considered more feminine to voice vowels that can be devoiced, and it's considered more masculine to devoice basically everything you can devoice. If you want a rough rule of thumb, then generally devoice the u vowel when you're allowed to, and generally voice the e vowel, whether you're allowed to devoice it or not. That'll put you in line with what you'll tend to hear on TV broadcasts and radio, and will be relatively neutral sounding. And so with that, we've covered the entire Japanese pronunciation system. To review, we began by talking about using dakuten, those two lines, to turn voiceless consonants into voiced ones.
That let us turn kakikugeko into gagigugeko,
We also mentioned a few weirdnesses there.
where, for instance, both chi and shi turns into ji, and hahifuheho turns into babibubepo, with dakuten and papibubepo with a little circle mark.
Then we covered how to use palatalized consonants with vowels other than e by combining the e-based symbols like ki and hi with small versions of other syllables like ya and yu.
This lets you make sounds like kya, kyu, hya, hyu, as in kyabetsu, kyuba, and hyuzu.
The rule of thumb there was that you take the first consonant of the first character and the vowel of the second small character and combine them into one syllable,
which Japanese also uses to make new syllables for foreign words like ti in pati and fe in peri.
We covered double consonants, which uses a small tsu character to double up the next consonant.
As in sakka and roji,
This character also shows up as a glottal stop at the ends of emphasized words.
like in atsu,
And then we covered double vowels.
which are indicated in katakana with a dash as in biba, and indicated in hiragana by writing in an extra vowel as in tori or oba-san.
We then went on to some of the only spelling exceptions in the entire Japanese language, the topic marker and the direction marker, which are spelled ha and he but pronounced wa and e. And the Japanese which is pronounced as an m, if it comes before lip consonants like p, b, or m, and n, if it comes before alveolar consonants like n, d, or t, and ng, sort of back end sound, if it comes before back consonants like k or g, and finally as a uvular n, if it shows up before basically anything else.
As in rinsu, kurenjingu, and nihon.
And last we talked about devoiced vowels, which can show up at the ends of words after voiceless consonants like s, k, t, or p, in the middle of words when they come between two voiceless consonants, and in cases where you have two possibly devoiced vowels in a row, you devoice the first one and voice the second one, as in kshi. And with that, we've covered the entire Japanese pronunciation system. If you need a hand in memorizing all of this stuff and training your ears to hear it accurately, then grab a Japanese pronunciation trainer from my website, linked below. You'll have all of this memorized within 3 or 4 weeks. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you next time.